What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the reveal of the number 7 team in my 2024 Power Rankings heading into the season. Today, we have a deep dive into the Cincinnati Bengals. Who Dey, the return of Joe Burrow, and the kickoff to a new tier in my Power Rankings of teams that have real reason to believe they can go on a deep playoff run. Not necessarily Super Bowl or bust teams, but I guess anything short of like a conference championship appearance might be a disappointment for our remaining teams. So the stakes continue to climb as we climb the rankings here. Before we do get started, if you could take just a second to hit that like button, it really does help me out. I really appreciate it. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the remaining deep dives and the beginning of my regular season content just around the corner here. But let's go ahead and get started by talking about the Bengals offseason, where they got better, where they got worse. Starting with the coaching staff, I do say slight downgrade. It's not something I'm super worried about, but Brian Callahan does leave from being the offensive coordinator, will now be the head coach for the Tennessee Titans, and they're going to promote Dan Pitcher internally there to that role. At quarterback, I'm going to say upgraded, as we've been doing with returning injured players. Joe Burrow played just over half the season last year, so I would say a half a year of Joe Burrow instead of Jake Browning is certainly an upgrade. At running back, I am going to say slightly downgraded. It's nothing I'm horribly worried about, but going from Joe Mixon to Zach Moss is at least somewhat of a downgrade, though it's a decent little signing to bring in Zach Moss to replace Mixon. But then at tight end, I do say slightly upgraded. All they're losing is Irv Smith, which isn't even really a loss. He gave them nothing in his 30% of his snaps. They bring in Mike Gesicki, who's a nice signing, even if he's been a bit off the radar as of late, and then a pair of day 3 draft picks with potential Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin. Should be hard for that tight end group to not be at least somewhat better than what it was last year. At wide receiver, they do lose Tyler Boyd. That's a notable player. Definitely was kind of your NPC wide receiver 3 at this point, though, and I think they can definitely stomach that loss. They have a bunch of young players they're excited about, and they drafted Jermaine Burton in the 3rd round. So I couldn't bring myself to say slightly downgraded on that. I feel pretty strongly that it's going to be better, even if on paper it looks like a slight downgrade from what they had last year. I'm going to just leave it as to be determined for now, and we'll talk about the bounty of wide receivers that they have on this roster later. At offensive line, I did settle on upgraded. Jonah Williams did play 100% of their snaps last year and was like, okay. He was like right tackle number 24 for them. But do I think they will get better than the 24th best right tackle in the NFL between both Trent Brown and first-round pick Amarius Mims? Yes, absolutely. So I do say upgraded on the O-line. But then you look at the defensive side of things, some change here, mostly with the defensive tackles and the safety room. So for interior defensive line, I do say slightly downgraded. Now, they did make some additions here. They didn't ignore this group. They bring in Shelton Rankins for $12 million a year, 2nd-round pick on Chris Jenkins, and a 3rd-round pick on McKinley Jackson. So they did definitely invest in this group, and they're looking to kind of future-proof it a little bit. But for the week 1 Bengals, this has got to be a downgrade. I mean, DJ Reader is one of the best nose tackles in the game when he's available. Played 50% of their snaps last year, did miss the end of last season, but they're going to have to prove that they can overcome the loss of that, basically gravitational force in the middle of the defense there. And Josh Tupou, a rotational player, is no longer here. So slightly downgraded with the interior D-line. At edge, I'll say neutral / slightly downgraded just because of some injuries here. They do lose Cam Sample, who was a nice kind of like 4th piece for them on that edge group. Nothing crazy, but that's 350 snaps that they will have to find a replacement for. Not enough for me to say slightly downgraded for the group overall. On top of that, Myles Murphy's going to miss the first few weeks of the season, but you could counter that by saying Myles Murphy should be more than what he was last year, and when he comes back, his role should increase with Cam Sample out. So it's a little push and pull there. They did draft Cedric Johnson in the 6th round as well. Was not a bad 6th-round pick. So I'm going to say neutral, but they do have some stuff to answer there with the depth. At linebacker, no change at all, staying neutral. At cornerback, on paper, definitely slightly downgraded. Depending on who watched the film last year, you might say massively downgraded. Chidobe Awuzie was playing, a year removed from a bad injury and was not his old self. Even if he might be able to bounce back for the Titans moving forward, he was not anything special for them last year. Now, they didn't really do much to replace him. They draft Josh Newton in the 5th round, and they are switching Dax Hill from safety to corner. And for that reason, I'm going to say to be determined at cornerback. I think it's possible that Daxton Hill can outperform what Chidobe Awuzie gave them in 66% of his snaps, of the team snaps last year. But for now, we will say slightly downgraded. At safety, definitely upgraded. I mean, this borders on being massively upgraded, though their additions aren't superstar players enough to justify that. But Nick Scott was just a brutal watch last year. He was a core reason, in my opinion, for why the Bengals defense was as bad as it was. Not just the bad coverage on the back end, but bad run defense. They ended up benching him and going to Jordan Battle at the end of the year. But they'll have 2 new starters this year, or at least one's not so new in Von Bell, I guess. He's coming right back after a stint in Carolina, if you will. And then they go interdivision with Geno Stone. So those 2 guys are set to be their starting safeties, and definitely should be better than what they had last year. They also spent a 7th-round pick on Dijon Anthony, I believe is how you say his first name. Overall, a fairly status quo offseason for the Bengals. They made some moves, but no major splashes, trying to find value between the margins, and especially now as they are gearing up to pay Jamar Chase. They're dealing with some cap stuff that didn't necessarily open the doors for them to go spend a bunch of money, but I still think it was a good offseason for the Bengals, and they did a good job to repair some holes that showed up last year. But before we break down the entire roster, let's talk about this coaching staff, how they rank against the rest of the league, as well as what this team's going to look like schematically on both sides of the ball. It's a familiar staff. Zach Taylor and Lou Anarumo heading into year 5 here for the Bengals. Obviously, together, these guys have had a lot of success. In the case of Zach Taylor, my opinion of him is steadily climbing, but I still don't view him as like a great offensive guru, like awesome head coach. I think he's very good. He's my 14th ranked head coach in the league in terms of the kind of coordinator rankings for this series. Pass game coaching, they are 11th to 14th. Run game coaching, 13th to 18th. Respectable rankings, but certainly not up there with your LaFleurs and McDaniels and McVays and Shanahans and all those top offensive masterminds. I still think there's, he leaves a little bit to be desired and has over the course of his time here left a little bit to be desired. But I do think we've seen things get better and better and him learning and growing as a head coach. For the first 3 years, I just straight up wasn't a fan. He would have been in more of the 20s of these rankings. I just didn't like his play calling, didn't like his run-pass balance, didn't think he did a good job kind of melding what he knows from that sort of under center, McVay, Shanahan-style offense that he came up in with Joe Burrow, who, as we've seen, is much better from the gun, keeping his eyes on the safeties, reading things pre-snap, being more of that almost like Peyton Manning sort of spread-style offense, if you will. And really, things didn't start to make sense from a offensive design standpoint until they really let Brian Callahan, kind of step in and get his paws in the offense, where they kind of famously, for those that have followed the channel and have followed the NFL deeply, there was I think it was a week 5 game against the Saints in 2022, where just basically overnight, they just said, screw it, we're a shotgun, almost exclusive offense now. And they had massive struggles for like the first 5 weeks of the season. They just made this switch, and then like magic, Joe Burrow was playing at an MVP level again. And, I just don't know how much credit to give Zach Taylor for that. I think a lot of those inspirations from that offense came from Brian Callahan. When you look at their coaching tree, Callahan came from much more of those kind of modern pro spread inspirations, if you will. But I do think Taylor gets some love for that. So my opinion of how the offensive coaching improved a little bit in 2022, and then it improved a little bit again last year when Joe Burrow did go down, and they did get really good play out of Jake Browning. I think that was the biggest and most promising inspiration of Zach Taylor's influence with more of the under center, play action, Shanahan, McVay style offense. That was the first time that I feel like it's really worked here. And I'm not saying that's an indictment of Joe Burrow. I think it's smart to lean into Joe Burrow's strengths, as we described, but to be able to take a backup quarterback, make things simpler, create open looks off of play action to their first read, that's the point of the Shanahan system. And Zach Taylor was finally doing that and executing that here. So I will give him credit for that. And now I think moving forward with Callahan gone after a half a season of that style of offense kind of working in many ways for the Bengals, just with much worse overall quarterback play, I'm almost looking at this season like Zach Taylor's like final boss stage. Like, okay, you've kind of gone through these different journeys of having Joe Burrow and not having Joe Burrow and two different types of offense that you've ran here. And can they come together and find like the right balance where this can work all together? And even in that 49ers game that the Bengals had last year, which was like right when they were starting to kind of catch fire right before Joe Burrow got hurt again, they had started to lean into a lot of that stuff as teams had adjusted to more of the Callahan 2x2 type of stuff that they were doing. So we didn't get to see the end of that story either. It was more just told through the lens of Jake Browning, if you will. But it's a big year for Zach Taylor, I think, in the lens of like, what is his upside? Just how good of an offensive mind is he? Because in theory, he could very much be like a LaFleur or a Kevin O'Connell, who I would rank above Zach Taylor. But hey, Zach Taylor has had Joe Burrow and a 2 or 3 year head start on those guys. And I don't think he's done what those other two guys have done from an offensive scheming perspective. So it's not that I think he's bad. It's just, is he great is the question on Zach Taylor. Certainly not someone that I would say is like on the hot seat, though. I think he's doing a fine enough job. And I do think from a, it's not all about the X's and O's. From a coach and culture, like locker room perspective, great leader. Love his overall kind of, the glimpses we get of him in the locker room and his kind of leadership style, being able to, stay in touch with these players. I think he does a very good job in that regard. And then they have Dan Pitcher getting promoted to offensive coordinator here. I'm sure he's solid. He's been in Cincinnati for almost 10 years now, mostly under Zach Taylor, but did spend some time under Ken Zampese, Bill Lazor, some more just older minds, if you will. So maybe a deeper pool of knowledge to draw from there if need be. But let's talk about the defensive coordinator. Lou Anarumo has been so brilliant here. They really, for the first time last year, showed some hiccups, especially in terms of run defense, where this team was brutal against the run. That's been uncharacteristic of this Bengals team. They've at least been average really in their time under Lou Anarumo. But last year, things just fell apart. The communication was clearly broken. There was something off about the safety unit specifically, but really just how it tied into the entire defense. And they were giving up a bunch of big plays. They kind of lacked physicality. They weren't making plays on the back end either. So maybe the first time you could have like any slight pause on Lou Anarumo. But I mean, I'm not going to just forget 2021 and 2022, where Lou Anarumo for 2 straight years was probably a top 3 to 5 defensive mind in the league. And he's one of the best game planners in the entire NFL. With Belichick gone, I think you would put Steve Spagnuolo ahead of him. And then I will sit here and argue Lou Anarumo with any other defensive coach in the league. I mean, his history now in playoff games of fine-tuning his defensive plan and having the ability to be multiple as well on top of that. 1 week being a man team, one week being a cover 3 team, 1 week being a quarters team, 1 week blitzing a bunch. Like just knowing how to beat the opponent that he's facing that week. He has been sensational, and he was a core reason why they were able to go to the Super Bowl a few years ago. A core thing that got them to the AFC Championship the year after that. These defenses have been sensational in the playoffs. They aren't necessarily like putting up these like 3-point shutout games, but the consistency in which they have limited opponent, like playoff opponents, to like 20 or less points is really impressive. So I do still have a lot of respect for Lou Anarumo. I think he's earned a lot of benefit of the doubt that he can get this defense right back on track after a weird year last year. And I have him second to sixth for pass game coaching, and then maybe knocked down a little bit from what we saw last year with the run defense. Now 11th to 16th for run defense, still good, but not necessarily great. Overall, I wouldn't say this is the best staff in the world, but it is a very good staff, and certainly one that's not going to like hold this team back from winning a Super Bowl or anything like that. Even if I would love to see one more step forward from Zach Taylor, because if he was even like a LaFleur or Kevin O'Connell caliber coach, I think you would feel maybe even a little bit better that the Bengals can kind of go on a Super Bowl run here with this team. Next up, we are going to break down this roster, but first I want to thank the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. Guys, we are 11 days away from the start of the NFL season, and Underdog Fantasy is the perfect place to gear up for all your fantasy needs. Still have time to participate in best ball drafts where you can take out your phone, do a draft right now. You can do a $2 draft or a $500 draft, depending on the stakes you're looking for. But I've been loving best ball. I've been finding myself doing a draft like every day because they're fun. Everybody loves a good fantasy draft. And then it's just your success is strictly based on the draft. There's no waivers. There's no trades. They will retroactively set your lineup based on who performed the best. And you got a chance at big, big winnings. But they also have Pick'em. So if you want to make sure you're glued to your seat for Chiefs, Ravens, or Eagles, Packers, or load up every game on NFL Sunday, you can pick higher or lower on all of your player stats with massive winnings possible there. Pick'em is the best and is your best way to maximize how much fun you have watching football this season. So that is promo code TFG over at Underdog Fantasy. Thank you to Underdog for being such a great partner and for sponsoring this video and really this whole series. And with that, let's get into the roster breakdown for the Bengals. Starting at quarterback, the return of Joe Burrow. I am super excited for this. I am a huge Joe Burrow truther. It pains me to see a lot of these quarterback rankings lists out there where Joe Burrow's starting to creep down 5, 6, 7. And I'm like, man, y'all are tripping. Like Joe Burrow, when he is healthy, is at worst the third best quarterback in the NFL. You want to argue Josh Allen over him, that's fine. In fact, in my overall rankings, I do have Josh Allen over him because of the rushing element that he brings to raise the floor of it all. But from a passing perspective, I do have Joe Burrow second. To me, he is the most cerebral quarterback in the NFL. If you were ranking processing and decision-making and ability to throw with anticipation, make checks at the line of scrimmage, change your protections, change the play, he's number one. And call me crazy, but I would say even more so than Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes just passes him up as an overall quarterback because Mahomes is also top 5 in processing and decision-making with some of the most insane physical traits you could drop on a quarterback, where Joe Burrow doesn't have the rocket arm attached to his shoulder blade that a Mahomes has. The only other guy would maybe be Aaron Rodgers. We forget he exists. So maybe Burrow's 2 behind Rodgers. We'll see what he looks like this year. But you get the point. Like his IQ is essentially as good as it gets at this position in the modern NFL. And it's so easy, I think, for a lot of people to just overlook that because he can't throw the ball 20 yards cross body off his back foot like some of these insane quarterbacks can. And he can't outrun the defense for, a 25-yard scramble. But he can get you the same result by recognizing a cover 2 rotation and throwing the ball into the hole shot up the sideline with anticipation on a dime and give you that same result. So the processing's insane, but the thing about Joe Burrow that I think does get him to this elite tier is that he does also have really good play extension ability. While he doesn't have the arm talent of a Patrick Mahomes, and as a result, his overall play extension ability isn't as great because there just aren't as many throws available to Joe Burrow, I would say in terms of feel in the pocket to know where the rush is coming from, when to step up, when to spin out, when to bolt out of the pocket, how to sense the rush, manage the pocket, know when and how to use his feet to extend plays, plus his just kind of overall elusiveness and ability to get out of sacks. It is up there. If it's not Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, it's still some of the best in the league. And he has great instincts and still really good arm talent in terms of accuracy on the move. And that pairs with that anticipation to just make throws that a lot of quarterbacks don't see available in play extension. In every deep dive we talk about Joe Burrow, I find myself circling back to my draft take on him, where I said he is Tom Brady from the waist up and Aaron Rodgers from the waist down. And I think that's aged to perfection here as one of my best draft pro comps I've ever had. I mean, can you think of a better way to describe Joe Burrow? He's got the cerebral ability to nickel and dime you, frustrate you with that 3rd and 7 conversion where he needles it through the zone coverage, keeps the chains alive, goes on these 11, 12, 13 play drives that just bleed you to death. He also has a lot of that kind of clutch factor with Tom Brady that I don't bring up with a lot of quarterbacks, but some quarterbacks, it's like Dak Prescott, it's the far end where it's like, I mean, he's consistently not showed up in big games. And then there's some quarterbacks where it's like, he might not even destroy the, Titans on a noon game on Sunday. He might have his ugliest game of the season when you least expected it. But when you need him and it's January and you got to keep a drive alive or you're trailing and you need a big conversion on 3rd and 9, he has that situational it factor about him to do what he needs to do to win the game for his team. Very much Tom Brady in that way. But also Tom Brady in the sense that we never really viewed Tom Brady as great because he had just this piss missile for an arm. I think his arm, at least from the pocket, was stronger than Joe Burrow's. I think he'd get a little bit more distance and velocity from a clean platform. But I also think Joe Burrow on the move, a little more accurate and a little more arm talent from an off-platform throw than a Tom Brady. But that was kind of the waist-up comparison, is like, not necessarily the most incredible arm, but yes, an incredible mind for the position. And then I said Aaron Rodgers from the waist down in the sense of like playmaking, pocket presence, which is partially mental, but it's a pro comp, it's a metaphor. It's not always going to be perfect. But then the Aaron Rodgers comp in the sense of everything related to kind of what he does with his feet as a quarterback, just his overall athleticism and mobility, I think is just similar to the level that Aaron Rodgers had in his prime. But also just the way he navigates space inside the pocket presence, the way he uses his feet to extend plays inside and out of the pocket, feels the rush, has those just painful snaps where you think you've got him, and then he breaks a sack or he steps up, seals off the edge so the tackle can block you. It's just all there with Joe Burrow. And obviously you combine those skill sets of Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and you end up with essentially a Hall of Fame talent like I think we have in Joe Burrow. Literally, it's just, please stay healthy. The football gods took Joe Burrow from us last year, and the football gods have led to the football casuals thinking Joe Burrow is the 7th best quarterback in the NFL, and it needs to stop. So let's get Joe Burrow out there, and if he is, the Bengals are Super Bowl contenders for sure. Especially as we look at the rest of this team, I think Joe Burrow is in that elite tier where it's like every given year you're going to give yourself a good chance to win the Super Bowl as long as you have like a solid team. So let's look at if this is a solid team. I do need to rewind for at least a quick second and mention Jake Browning, the backup. I thought he played valiantly, better than I ever expected from Jake Browning. Clearly is kind of a poor man's Joe Burrow in terms of play style. He's been in this system, stepped in, knew the offense, and I think is a good case study for like why teams should keep a backup around as long as you have coaching continuity. Because even if you have a guy that really wasn't much in college, doesn't have much of a strong arm, if he's in that system and understands what's going on, you can feel more comfortable about him stepping in. And as long as Jake Browning is on the Bengals, I think he's one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. If you forced him to learn a whole new offense and put him in a different structure, probably not going to be the case. But I do like him here. If Burrow does get banged up for a week or two, we saw last year, like, he can keep you in games for sure. But the upside is just not anywhere close. But now let's talk about the weapons here for the Bengals. It's a familiar group with some new faces here. But obviously at the top, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. It's almost unfortunate for the Bengals that they are following up the Dolphins, who are probably the only wide receiver duo in the league better than these two. So it's a tough act to follow here for this series, but obviously very high praise there in a league loaded with weapons for me to say this is the second best duo of wide receivers in the league. And really them, without a whole lot of help, make the Bengals essentially a top 10 group of weapons in this NFL. They rank 7th to 11th for me for overall weapons. But you start with Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is finally gearing up for that super season, kind of like what CeeDee Lamb did last year, where we knew he was great, but the production had yet to reach like God tier. And I think through 3 years, the tape on Jamar Chase is better than the tape we had on CeeDee Lamb. I feel even more confident to say that the talent is there for Jamar Chase to make that leap. But, you know, he had that monster rookie season, 1,450 yards, 13 touchdowns. The last 2 years, 1,200 yards, 1,046 yards. We know Jamar Chase is an elite wide receiver, but can he have that, like, just stupid season that we've seen from guys of his caliber? CeeDee Lamb's a good one, but like Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson's put up crazier numbers. Julio Jones going back a few years to Atlanta in 2016. That's really like the last final leg for Jamar Chase. And to me, it hasn't all synced up the last couple of years. They've had some weird like scheme stuff going on where they've had some kind of identity crisis on that side of the ball. Joe Burrow's been banged up. Jamar Chase has been banged up. So it's weird to put the up arrow on Jamar Chase, but, you know, heading into his fourth season, trying to get paid here, I mean, he could be like your number one fantasy player this year. He could have that type of season. And I'm kind of excited to say, like, Burrow and Chase together have like a little bit to prove heading into this season, and it could be really fun. But again, from a skill set perspective, the size, the speed, the route running, the release, the run after catch, the ball skills, it's all there. It always was there with Jamar Chase. He's one of the best wide receiver prospects I've ever evaluated and has completely lived up to it on film. But even with all that said, he gets a 92 grade for me, which is obviously highly respectable. But that's going to get him, like the 5th or 6th ranked wide receiver for this series. I think there is room for him to climb and, again, reach that sort of God tier production this season. Have that like 1,800 yards, 16 touchdown, like offensive player of the year type of season for the Bengals that he just hasn't quite gotten to that degree yet, like guys like Hill, CeeDee, Justin Jefferson have. Could even throw like A.J. Brown up there too, who's put up back-to-back 1,500-yard seasons. But then you don't need me to tell you that having T. Higgins next to him is freaking awesome. I love that the Bengals said, look, T, like, we just paid Joe. We got to take care of Jamar. We love you, but, like, we can't pay you yet. And I think it was almost lucky for the Bengals that last year T. Higgins dealt with some injuries himself, and then Joe Burrow goes down, and T didn't have, like, the Ayuk season from last year, right? Like, Ayuk has all the leverage to say, like, no, my price is never going any lower than it is right now. I maxed out last year, pay me now. T, it's like coming off a 656-yard season where he had some, like, weird uncharacteristic drops and, like, kind of wasn't old T, it makes total sense for him to say, all right, you know what, I will come back and play on the tag, bet on myself, and maybe instead of making $24 million this year, which I think is about what the Bengals have been offering him, I'll make $30 million next year. And from the Bengals' perspective, they're able to wait this thing out, because I think they would love to keep this trio intact with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. I think they've entertained trades for Higgins, but they're not going to sell him short of what they think he can be for them this year either. So you're now putting almost another player that's kind of coming out with a lot to prove here for this Bengals team. And the identity of this team is that trio of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Those three guys kind of with something to prove, with a chip on their shoulder. This could be insane this year with how dominant these guys could be. But I will also say, like, last year, I think T. Higgins would have been in that superstar tier for me, which is 86 plus. He comes in with an 85 grade for me because he just straight up wasn't T. Higgins last year. I think you have to ding him, even if it's just one ratings point. You have to ding him a little bit for what he did last year. You want to see him come back out and consistently be that alpha, even if the flashes of him being, you know, really one of the best true X wide receivers in the league were still in there with some of the sideline catches. I mean, the touchdown he had against the Vikings with Jake Browning, it got copyrighted because that play is insane and it's everywhere on every network. But go look up the touchdown he had against the Vikings. Like, that was maybe the catch of the year. So you know that guy is still in there. But yeah, I mean, obviously a disappointing season last year. But again, I think that is going to work out for the best to keep these guys all together. But they might end up trading T, get a first-round pick for him. And I think what will really decide that is how these young wide receivers step up and look this year. Because they have a bunch of different skill sets here. And honestly, this group reminds me a ton of what we said about the Green Bay Packers last year, where you didn't really know who was going to be playing, who was getting the ball, who was going to step up, but then they all ended up stepping up. And then the Packers have like one of the deepest group of weapons in the league now. I look at this group with Andre Iosivas, Trenton Irwin, Charlie Jones, and Jermaine Burton, and it brings back so many flashes, especially when you talk about like all these guys have such different skill sets, which is the case in Green Bay with that group too, if you watch the Packers deep dive. But I couldn't bring myself to list any one of these guys as the wide receiver 3 here, because I think these guys are all going to play. It's all going to be situational based on matchup and, you know, depending on if they want Jamar in the slot or outside, because they will move him all over the place. It'll depend on what types of corners the other team has. But I will start, I guess, with Andre Iosivas. And he would be the guy that if he steps up specifically, that would probably let the Bengals feel comfortable about losing T. Higgins, because he's the guy that he's tall, he's fast, he has flashed insane catches towards the sideline. Really good athlete coming out of Princeton that just has been trying to kind of prove himself at the NFL level. Had his ups and downs in his rookie year last year, but they are, I think, internally excited about him, and they think he's going to play a lot here. But they do like Trenton Irwin. He's the more vet that doesn't necessarily have the upside here, but he will still play because he's going to be your scrappy do-it-all dude. He does play out to the sideline and can make some catches down the boundary. He can make tough catches over the middle, but they also like to kind of block with him and have him pave the way for Jamar Chase on the perimeter. Like, he'll do that for them. And he's just been the veteran presence here. So he's going to get into the mix. And then you have Charlie Jones, was a super talented slot wide receiver out of Purdue. I loved this pick when they made it. And I immediately pinned him as the Tyler Boyd replacement. But I think when Jamar Chase is outside, which historically has been about 3/4 of the time for the Bengals, I think Charlie Jones is probably their best option in the slot right now, just because he's the guy that can run those option routes for Joe Burrow, sit down in zones, be a run after catch threat. He's an awesome return guy to have here as well. I definitely think Charlie Jones, it's more a matter of just health and how much he plays. I just think there's so much talent there. Such a clear projection as a capable slot wide receiver. And he has some experience playing outside, but he's definitely a more slender guy that you project inside. So he's got a pretty clear role in this offense. I think he'll play a lot in those slot looks. And then Jermaine Burton's kind of your wild card, off-field issue type of dude that had borderline first-round tape. Like, I think if he didn't have the off-field issues, if he was at the Senior Bowl and getting a lot of that pre-draft hype that maybe someone like Ricky Pearsall did, I think he'd be right in, and maybe Xavier Legette is another dude kind of in the category of like how good their film was. He was right up there with those guys, but he had major character red flags, transferred away from Georgia, went to Alabama, was a 4-year player. And he clearly had 3-year talent, but was a 4-year player. He had an incident where he kind of shoved/punched, I believe it was a female reporter or a female fan on the field in frustration after a loss. Just a couple days ago, was it Al Michaels basically said he's falling asleep in meetings for the Bengals? Like, the talent is undeniable for this dude, but clearly a bit of a head case. If they can rein him in, he, I suppose, also has the potential to be the type of player that they could see and say, okay, we're cool to let T. Higgins go because we have a 2 in Jermaine Burton. This is a guy he's got the size, he's got the route running, he catches everything, he's got speed. Again, his tape is phenomenal, but there's obviously more to it than that. So just kind of, we'll see on him. Ultimately, the sort of unprovenness of wide receiver 3, and even some of the tight end and running back stuff that we'll talk about, is why the Bengals settle in with a B+ grade, 7th to 11th, as opposed to even higher than that. There are still some question marks, some guys that have to step up here. We rank these teams at their floor and these position groups at their floor heading into week 1, and there's just room to grow for a lot of this. I talk very positively about their projection, but it isn't a guarantee that any of these guys step up as like consistent starters for them. I would certainly bet that they do, though. But let's talk about some of those other ancillary weapons here. And by the way, the Bengals are in the process of making cuts. The show must go on. There's going to be some players that I list here that got cut. A lot of them will end up back on the practice squad anyway, but I'm just letting you know I'm like recording this here in the middle of Saturday. So some of these guys might be cut by the time this video comes out, but it should be mostly good to go. But yeah, let's talk about Mike Gesicki next. I'm excited about Mike Gesicki, but a little bit of it is like, is this more the idea of Mike Gesicki here is more exciting than what we'll actually get? I don't know. I kind of lean towards he's going to be pretty good, but honestly, the main complication is like how many targets does he get? Because we just went through like 4 wide receivers that are also going to play here, and they also like Drew Sample for his blocking, so it's just like, is he really going to have this huge season for the Bengals? It seems pretty unlikely, but I think on his like individual targets that he does get within this offense, I think he fits really well. And Gesicki over the last few years just has not been in a spot that is conducive to his success. In Miami, McDaniel comes in. We just did the Dolphins. We talked about how like their tight ends, they're there to stay in to block. Like they want that tight end in for protection, in for the run game. And that is not Mike Gesicki. He is effectively a slot wide receiver. And then he goes to the Patriots, and it's like, oh, he's going to be the second guy to Hunter Henry and can play inline 12 personnel and all this. And their play calling and quarterback play was a dumpster fire. But in theory, Mike Gesicki is a really nice fit in more of a spread style offense that has a role for the tight end to play the majority of his snaps as a slot wide receiver. And the Bengals absolutely have that role in their third down passing setup. Gesicki can run routes. He's got great hands, really good size, good length, decent run after catch ability. And when he was in a different offense in Miami, he showed some really good stuff, was kind of bordering on being a top 10 to 15 tight end. So I don't think that talent is gone. He's just been in a horrible setup the last few years. So I think getting to come in here with a good scheme fit and a great quarterback Even for a 29-year-old player, I think the arrow can actually be pointing up on Mike Gesicki. And then another guy with the arrow pointing up here in Chase Brown. The dude's insanely explosive. He was hyper productive at Illinois. He had I can't remember the number, but this was a big point on his draft profile. He had I know he had almost 2,000 total yards, but I think it was maybe just over 50% of his team's yards as a running back is crazy. He has explosiveness catching the ball. He has great speed after the catch. He's got instincts and is just a lightning in a bottle type of player. And, Zach Moss will play because he's a really good pass protector. But they will throw the ball to Chase Brown probably more than they throw to Zach Moss. And they'll find ways to get him the ball because he's just so dynamic. He only has 14 catches in his NFL career, so I can't rank him out that high. And he's just not a good pass blocker, so he's not a complete receiving back. But he very much could emerge as a legit weapon for the Bengals, or he could just be kind of a nice piece here, a nuisance and an explosive presence when they do tap into him. I think that will kind of, for the most part, depend on how these other young wide receivers step up. And Mike Gesicki, if all these other guys are struggling, they might need to lean into Chase Brown as a weapon out of the backfield more often. If the other guys step up, he will be probably more of a design touch type of receiving back. But either way, his efficiency should be pretty damn nice as long as he's not dropping the ball or fumbling it. His kind of overall ball skills and ball security are essentially the reason he was available as late as they took him in the draft in the 5th round. Man's got the juice, though. They also have Travion Williams, who they've leaned on for some pass downs work at times. But then your other tight end depth, we do need to talk about. Drew Sample will play because he's the blocker in this room. Just has never been much of a receiving presence, and they're obviously looking for more in that department with all these other guys they brought in. Tanner Hudson stepped up as a nice possession tight end. He was pretty reliable for them last year, kind of a nice little mini breakout season, if you will. How much we see of him is going to depend on the rest of these guys. If Gesicki or these rookies step up, Hudson will probably just be in a backup role, but he is kind of a nice little replacement level starter available for them whenever they need him. And then the two rookies, Eric All out of Iowa, really talented player that we just haven't seen much of. He transferred away from Michigan after 4 years there, had kind of a mysterious injury, hiccup / mishandling with the program there. Goes to Iowa, is starting, looks really nice, and then he goes down with, I believe it was an ACL tear. So he's had just wild durability questions and is still recovering from that ACL. That's going to be a huge question on his projection. But, as you expect from a Michigan-Iowa tight end, he blocks. Even if he's not the biggest guy, he can block in line as well. Runs really nice routes, little mini shades of Sam Laporta in some of the quick routes that he ran. Athletic after the catch. There is legit upside with him for him to be a 4th-round steal. I can't say it all comes down to durability, but that's the biggest hiccup on him. And then they also took Tanner McLaughlin in the 6th round. He's kind of Mike Gesicki-esque in the sense of he's more of a slot wide receiver than he is a tight end. But again, this is a scheme that can work for him. And he's a good receiving tight end, man. He made some really impressive catches at Arizona and is still kind of coming into his own as a overall tight end. So I guess maybe shades of Colby Parkinson if he was 2 inches shorter might be kind of my thoughts on him, but I do like the landing spot. And because of All's durability, he was a nice 6th-round pick to have another flyer there. So they have a very talented tight end room. Wouldn't be surprised if they keep all 5 of these guys because they all kind of make sense here. But that does round out your group of weapons. Ranking this group at their floor, they come in top 10 essentially. I would almost bet on them, though, to transcend that and to be more of a top 5 to 7 group of weapons. I just can't quite rank them all the way up there because there are a lot of unproven entities here. Even as we said, Jamar Chase, Can't say he's unproven, but there's even room for him to be more in terms of how we rate him out than what we've seen so far. But things do get a lot less exciting with the running backs. They come out as my 28th to 30th ranked group of running backs. It's not a horrible group. It's a sufficient duo here that I think the complementary skill sets work. And, they can allow the Bengals offense to do what they want to do and not necessarily hold them back. But I also don't think this is going to help this run game evolve or become some dangerous, nightmarish backfield to defend either. Zach Moss is very solid, capable starter. Love this opportunity for him. He looked good for the Colts last year. He really did. He's just a very limited overall athlete. I feel like he's pretty maxed out as this kind of gritty, tough runner, capable back. I think he's good enough that he's going to kind of hold off Chase Brown from taking over as any sort of like feature back here. I think Zach Moss probably gets ultimately 60 to 65% of the carries because as we'll talk about Chase Brown, the ball security is an issue. Zach Moss, that's not the case. 0 fumbles last season, but also just like power, consistency, vision, night and day really between Zach Moss and Chase Brown. And on a down-to-down basis, that's what you want to kind of hang your hat on. And then you bring in Chase Brown as more of the explosive, I don't want to say gadget back, but he is your juice. And it's always a challenge for the coaching staff too. Like, you don't want it to be a tell when Chase Brown is in there that it's outside zone or that it's a pass. So that is going to be a challenge for Zach Taylor when you have two completely different types of backs to not make it a predictable thing for the opposing defense. But if you want to get the most out of Chase Brown, you want him running outside. You want to flip the ball to him on screens and swing passes. Give him as open of a lane as you can and let him bolt through it. But in terms of like patience and inside zone running, which they do like their fair share of it here, he will get bounce happy and he's not going to run through a lot of linebackers and arm tackles from defensive tackles. He's just not. That's not who he is. That's what Zach Moss is. So I know there's a lot of excitement for Chase Brown, but I just don't really see him overtaking Zach Moss as like this fantasy football darling this year. He's kind of a player I'm mostly avoiding. In fact, I traded him away for a second-round pick in a dynasty league. I like him for what he is, but I have seen a lot of hype on Chase Brown. I think he's a bit more one-dimensional, and the probability of him having a fumble every 4 to 5 weeks that just makes it so the coaching staff can't trust him is too high for me. Now, if he can clean that up, we can start to talk. And that's not to say the arrow isn't pointing up on him. It is. He's rated quite low because he's a 5th-round pick that had 44 carries last year. He most certainly can prove to be more of a consistent weapon for this Bengals team. But again, I do think the conversation for me on Chase Brown stops short of him being more than like a, DeAndre Swift or Khalil Herbert. Funny, those guys are on the same team. There is just a little bit something missing in terms of completeness from his game at the position. Would love to be wrong, though, because, again, the athleticism, the juice, the explosiveness he brings is obviously exciting. So if there is development there in terms of vision and fumbling issues, you can get really excited, but he is 24 years old, will be 25 when the season's over. It's like, if those things haven't really clicked by now, hard to say that they're going to click, especially at this position. Seems quite rarely that you get guys figuring it out at 25, 26 years old at this position. I don't know. I'm not trying to be overly negative on Chase Brown. It's just I do think the hype train on him has reached a point that I just can't quite match, even if I liked him as a prospect, maybe more than a lot of people did. Not expecting much from Travion Williams. Just hasn't been very efficient when he's played. Must be a locker room guy that they like. Maybe they like his pass protection. But it does seem like they'll probably go with those 3 guys. And then Elijah Collins, as of this recording, is still competing for maybe a 4th spot. We'll see there. But then, for Joe Burrow, you're just not getting anything in the run multiplier aspect. Theoretically, you could run a read option with him, and maybe they will run 2 or 3 throughout the season, but they mostly want to avoid him getting hit at all costs. So we're not going to put a numbers advantage in the run game from the quarterback here for the Bengals. Obviously, with a pretty mid running back room there, the offensive line is going to be very integral for how well they're able to run the ball this year. And they come out 21st to 23rd for me for run blocking. They're just kind of meh in that regard. But they are much better as a pass blocking unit. I think they're very solid there. They rank 9th to 15th, so top half for pass blocking. And overall, they're 17th to 19th for offensive line. Overall, just a solid unit. I don't have a ton of takes with this group. You have Orlando Brown at left tackle. He's been a nice signing for what they paid him. You know, you go back a couple years ago, I would have said he's an overrated player as he was looking for like top-end tackle money. But, I mean, is he a good starting left tackle? Call him top 20 or so, worth $16 million a year that they ended up getting him for in free agency. Like, yeah, I mean, he's impossible to drive backwards. You can run around him. But Joe Burrow, with his great pocket presence, is really good at just stepping up. They have a type with these tackles, and the Tom Brady stuff comes right back to me with this, because Tom Brady was always like, just give me massive tackles that aren't going to get pushed inwards. If someone runs around that dude, I will consistently feel that, step up in the pocket, and allow that tackle to get that angle back inside that nice, pretty pocket. Because he's not a guy that's going to like drift back and let that edge rusher continue to, win that edge. So they go for these guys for a reason. And this tackle trio, we're going to end up saying a lot of the same things about, because they're all 360 pounds. But he's a very good fit for what they do from a pass protection standpoint. Even if he does have, he'll have some ugly losses at times, because he is just probably the least athletic starting tackle in the league when you pair with the fact that he's so big. But yeah, you're not going through him, and they like that about him above anything else. You wish he was a little more consistent as a run blocker. He will obviously have some dominant wins in the right situation because he is just so big and strong. But run blocking is also about get off, hand placement, leverage, getting to a spot, and there's just a lot of stuff you can't really ask him to do. So he is a more limited run blocker in that sense. At left guard, you have Cordell Volson. He's going to be your question mark, I think, with this offensive line, but you are encouraged based on how he played in the final 8 weeks of last season. They have stuck to him almost to a fault. It felt like really at that breaking point of like, why the hell are they still playing Cordell Volson? Right at that breaking point, he kind of turned it on. So their faith in him has slowly been paying off. And, it's tough to know if he just got lucky, got hot, played well for the second half of the year, or if he fully figured things out. For the first half of the year, he was still a borderline turnstile for this O-line. But definitely encouraged that the arrow is pointing up on him heading into year 3. Was a 4th round pick in 2022 out of North Dakota State. So, I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but could settle in as like an okay player. But you can't have him taking a half step backwards and being anything close to what he was really for the first 3 quarters of his career to this point. Ted Karras at center, super, super solid, incredibly smart, good play strength. Tough to get through as a pass blocker. Not a great athlete, so some of the run blocking deficiencies show up there. But, he's been a nice center, nice signing for them from New England, and you expect him to repeat that. Pretty much likewise with Alex Kappa. He's a little bit different. He's a good athlete. His play strength to me at times can be hit or miss. But yeah, he's just an overall solid guard, not the most efficient lockdown pass protector, not the most nasty run blocker, but gets the job done in both phases. Not really a ton to say about those two guys. They were both just kind of like raise the floor signings, and they've done that from that brutal 2021 offensive line that they had. And then I love the Trent Brown signing. I mean, copy and paste everything I said about them wanting a tackle that's not going to get pushed backwards. Trent Brown is that and some. he's even a better pass protector than Orlando Brown when he plays. I think his just overall technique to seal that edge is even better. And I think he's an overall better athlete in the run game as well. Problem with Trent Brown is you almost anticipate that he will miss about half the season. It's very similar to what we just said about Teron Armstead, where you know he's a really good player when he's out there. He's a top 8 right tackle in the league probably when he's healthy, but he's available for a reason, and he's available for cheaper than you'd think for a reason because his body just betrays him consistently. And that's, again, why he was cheaper and also why they spent a first-round pick on Amarius Mims. They know Trent Brown is not the long-term answer at right tackle, and they know within this season they will probably need a tackle to step in for about 6 to 10 games. And I think when you put all of the stuff we've talked about these tackles together, there couldn't have been a better first-round pick for the Bengals than Amarius Mims. First off, just in terms of scheme fit, give me the giant dude that is not going backwards. That is Amarius Mims. But also, what an opportunity for a guy to kind of get into sort of a mentor position behind 2 veterans that have similar size, that have done it at this level, at a very high level. Put him in a position behind those guys where he can kind of see how they go about their business, learn from them, what they get away with, what they can't get away with, but also in a spot where he's probably going to have to play, right? Trent Brown is almost certainly going to go down. And then there's also, just by good old probability, like Orlando Brown might miss a game or 2. So Mims will play. And man, I think he's going to play really well. I was a huge fan of Amarius Mims. I definitely had him ahead of a couple of tackles that got taken ahead of him in this draft. But he was more of a risky player in the sense that he kind of like barely played at Georgia. He basically played a season's worth of snaps, if that, at Georgia. Part of that was for the first couple of years, there was another NFL level prospect ahead of him, Warren McClendon, who's on the Rams. But he overtook McClendon by his sophomore year, and then inside his junior year, he just got banged up, missed a handful of games. So the sample size on him is very small, and we know sample size matters in this sport. But his tape, on a game-to-game basis, if you just gave me one game of healthy Amarius Mims, one game of healthy Joe Alt, and all the other tackles, just give me one game. Give me their best game, and I have to pick one player, you're taking Amarius Mims. Because while he is big as hell, like Orlando Brown and Trent Brown, he is way more athletic than those guys. He has legit foot speed, and some people have compared him to Mekhi Becton. I think his foot speed is so much better than Mekhi Becton's ever was, and his upside is literally as high as it gets. And I think, as we've described, this is the perfect spot for him to reach that upside. Unfortunately, he did get hurt in the preseason, and by all accounts, he had looked phenomenal before he got banged up, to the point that they were maybe even going to just start him over Trent Brown. I think they revert to plan A here, and Trent Brown is probably the week 1 starter as long as he's healthy. But the second he goes down, they might put in Amarius Mims. And then if Mims looks great, which I think he might not lose that job. Or they might say, okay, Trent Brown's back. Trent, you're the left tackle. Orlando, go take a seat. They have flexibility to guarantee that they have really good tackle play out there this season. I really like that. It's more just the interior is just super mid, in my opinion, which is kind of how they come out more of an average to slightly below average offensive line. And they don't really have the depth at interior offensive line. Cody Ford, highly drafted guy, hasn't really had any semblance of consistency in the league. Matt Lee was a 7th-round pick out of Miami. Good pass production metrics from him down there for an undersized center. Trey Hill has a lot of talent, just hasn't been able to kind of put it all together here, I don't think. Not really anybody I would trust on the interior. So I do definitely want to see those 3 starters, stay healthy on the interior of the O-line. And it is a little bit of a bummer. I wish there was someone else that if Volson is really struggling, someone else you could say, okay, if Volson sucks, we can put that guy in. They don't really have that dude because for me, Brown, Mims, and Brown are all just too big to play guard. you could maybe get away with it, but it'd be pretty unprecedented for guys that big to step inside. And then in terms of tackle depth after Mims as well, they just cut in a bit of a surprise Jackson Carman. And we'll see who kind of makes the team there. But it would obviously be a concern if you have to go any deeper than Amarius Mims for depth. Like if that Trent Brown injury that you know is coming strikes early before Mims is ready to play, you could run into some rough weeks there with Jackson Kirkland or Devin Cochran out there unless they sign a different veteran. But a pretty mid group in the sense of run blocking. No one truly sucks there, but none of them are like great run blockers. The best run blocker they have is Trent Brown, who you feel pretty sure is only going to be there half the season. Amarius Mims could be a difference maker there. Just can't grade him out quite that high yet, obviously. But from a pass protection standpoint, they are above average. It's a really good group that's frankly going to buy time for Joe Burrow and help him distribute the ball and lead to explosive plays as well. So I like that element of it. You put the whole thing together, the Bengals come out as my 8th overall offense, but 2nd in passing game. And that right there did surprise me when I was looking at the ratings. I don't know that they'll finish like 2nd in offensive DVOA because it's not the most explosive offense. You're not going to get those like high. I mean, you'll get some of that from Jamar Chase for sure. But there are more offenses in the league that I would definitely say are more explosive than the Bengals. But on a down-to-down consistency element, it does kind of make sense. I think they have a well-constructed early down passing game with a lot of different options to get the ball to and a quarterback that will distribute that. And then when it's 3rd and 8, are there many other offenses that will have a better chance at converting that than Joe Burrow with these wide receivers and a good old line? No, not really. So I do think 2nd in passing game in the league is fair. But they are definitely dragged down by the run game. It's just a very inconsequential run game. A bunch of meh. Pretty par for the course for what the Bengals run game has been. And that does put a lot of pressure on the passing game. And as we've seen, that has put pressure on this offense and this team over the years, just not really been able to get the ground game going. And I just don't know how different that's going to be this year, but I have a lot of faith that the passing game can more than make up for it as well. Now, let's talk about this defense, a defense that obviously had a lot of troubles last year. Will be an interesting conversation to look at like who they have to work with and can they just get back to being they don't have to be like an amazing defense with an offense this good, but can they just be like a solid offense here? And that's going to start up front with the defensive line here. They come in pretty much smack dab in the middle of the league for me for defensive line. 14th to 17th overall, 13th to 16th in pass rush, and a little bit below average for the D-line run defense, 14th to 23rd. So pretty average here. Let's start with the edge guys. You have Trey Hendrickson, who is their saving grace here. He is maybe the last player in the league that I would describe as a number 1 edge rusher. Like if you're putting together a list of here's all the guys that if they're your best pass rusher, you're fine with that. Trey Hendrickson probably would be at the very end of that. We'll see. I'm going to be doing weekly tier maker videos once the season starts here, and one of the early ones I'm going to do is going to be edge rushers. So I think that'll hold up. I could be forgetting someone. But that said, like from a pure pass rushing perspective, he's right easily in there. But he is quite clearly the worst run defender out of any number 1 edge in the league. The big knock on Trey Hendrickson has always been arm length, and that he's proven that doesn't really slow him down as a pass rusher. But in terms of being able to stack, engage, shed, peak, all of the typical run defense things, that's not Trey Hendrickson. He might splash in the backfield and make a high impact play, but down to down, you just are not really getting anything from him. He will try. His effort is unquestioned, but there's just only so much he can do. And his just overall play strength also isn't that great. Like some guys have shorter arms, but really good play strength. Hendrickson can get power from speed to power, but in terms of anchor and shed strength, it's just not great. So that's like the knock on Trey Hendrickson. But as a rusher, I mean, he's been way up there in efficiency. Like, I can't say top 5 necessarily because there's just some insane edge rushers in the league right now, but easily top 10 strictly from his pass rushing numbers. An absolute flamethrower off the edge. He's a finisher. When he wins, he typically wins fast and turns his pressures into sacks. He's really good at stripping the ball, forcing fumbles, back-to-back years inside the top 10 in forced fumbles. And again, he does win with power. It's not his like go-to though. He's more of a speed to bend and wins with a lot of swipes and rips. And he just kind of overwhelms you with like speed and quickness and effort a lot of the times. Doesn't have like crazy bend either, but his lateral quickness is really good for inside counters and to change directions. So he's, again, a saving grace here and a big reason, if not the main reason, that this is still a top half in the league pass rush. Opposite of him, though, it's not great, man. Sam Hubbard, to me, is, if Preston Smith is the MPC edge 2, to me, Sam Hubbard is the NPC edge 3 that just happens to have been asked to be their number 2 edge here. His efficiency, really in either regard, are just not very good. His pressure percentage is almost exactly 10%, which we've consistently said throughout this series is like, that is like the starting point for like a starting caliber number 3 edge in the league. It's like 10% of your pass rush snaps, you're getting a pressure. And pass rush win rate, 61st in the league. Surely not horrible, but far from efficient. He is an adequate player to start full time, but obviously you would just want more, and the Bengals do want more. That's why they've been fishing, right? They spent a first-round pick on Myles Murphy. They spent a third-round pick on Joseph Asai. They've been looking for a little bit more juice and consistency here, and if you could slide Sam Hubbard into what, in my opinion, would be his natural role as the first guy off the bench, a high-effort dude that, the starter rotates out and Sam Hubbard rotates in and the tackle says, man, I got to deal with this guy now. Like, yeah, that would be a great role for him. But if every single snap he's the guy that you got to block, you're like, all right, I can do this. And unfortunately, the Bengals are just going to have to wait to see if Myles Murphy can be that guy that kind of dethrones Sam Hubbard as the full-time starter here, because he went down for a multiple week injury. I think it was a 4 to 6 week injury that occurred about a week ago. So about the first month, they're going to be without Myles Murphy. It's not the worst injury in the world, but it did kind of set them back just slightly. Not enough to change my ratings on them or anything, but it was a little bit of a bummer. And I believe in Myles Murphy. He grew on me as a prospect, and I don't think he was horrible for a rotational rookie edge. He drew a lot of Rashawn Gary comps. I don't think he was the prospect that Rashawn Gary was, but similar in the sense of like he came in as an edge 3, is a speed to power, athletic bull rushing type of dude that you are projecting more year 2, year 3 to be special on him. And I went in, I watched all 22 of his pressures because you can do that now on NFL Pro. It's phenomenal. And I think he looked solid, again, for a rookie edge. The athletic traits are clearly there. The power is clearly there. He's trying some different counters to mixed effectiveness. And I certainly don't think this injury is setting them off course in terms of can he become the number 1 edge in time. But it did make it a little bit less likely that happens this season, even if it's 3 or 4% less likely. I still think when we get to week 12, week 13, Myles Murphy gets healthy, we could start to see that ramp up and they start to kind of pass the baton to him. And if that happens, that's going to be game-changing for this group if he is taking that step and becoming more of a legit number 2, because not only does that elevate your number 1 edge spot, but again, if Sam Hubbard can become your 3 and your first guy off the bench and he can buy snaps for Murphy and Hendrickson to stay fresh, love that. We'll see. Murphy's definitely a big wild card for the upside of this defense. But I will say, it's not the worst case scenario when you have Joseph Asai as the kind of presumptive number 3 edge now. He was heading into the year going to just be a part of this big rotation with Murphy and Cam Sample, who heads to IR. Asai has the opportunity of a lifetime here. Now fully recovered from injury, was efficient when he played last year, but barely played. And he was starting to come on at the end of that rookie season. And forgive me, I can't remember the exact details of the injury, but I mean, he only played 177 snaps last year and was playing from week 3 to week 18. So Bengals fans will have to clarify that for me, like what necessarily happened there, if he was just always dinged up and couldn't really get on the field, or if they just didn't like him. But he did have 11 pressures and a sack on all 109 of his pressures, so that was pretty solid. And this is a dude I like coming out of Texas with a lot of speed and bend and decent finesse. I don't think he's atrocious against the run, so good opportunity for Asai, and I definitely think he can at least play at a good enough level as a first guy off the bench where they can sustain good edge play until Murphy comes back, and then you have a nice foursome here. And I've got the arrow pointing up on both Murphy and Asai. I think Murphy's upside is even higher because his traits are even higher. But as you look way down the road, if Asai plays really well in this opportunity and Murphy comes back and looks good and these guys kind of reach your upside, Trey Hendrickson is nearing the end of his contract. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but could this be the future edge duo of the Bengals? I think at their upside, could be a solid group. Maybe not the most insane group, but could be a solid group between the two of them. They also took Cedric Johnson in the 6th round. That was a couple rounds later than I thought he would go. I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on Cedric Johnson. Tradesy, SEC, Ole Miss edge that played in that weird 3-3-5 system. They asked him to play a lot of 4-tech. Reminded me a little bit of Sam Williams coming out to a lesser degree. I'm not saying he's going to be as efficient as Sam Williams has been, but I saw some stuff in his game that I liked. So he's another guy to keep an eye on that is going to have an opportunity here. Rounding out, a pretty fascinating edge group. The interior of the defensive line is also not bad. BJ Hill is a very solid player, good run defender, good pass rusher, good athlete, checks a lot of boxes, but just isn't overly efficient or insane in any regard. Shelton Rankins, who they signed, is a little bit more polarizing. Hyper athlete, really nice pass rushing profile. Not the biggest guy, not the most powerful guy, but he can get under your pads and push you backwards. But he wins in a lot of ways, but there are weeks where he's just trying a lot of shit and nothing's working. So he has his inconsistencies in his game. Houston's not going to miss him too much, but he had a nice year last year. He's been, he's really settled in as a good player when healthy. He had a lot of injury stuff derailing him early in his career, but he's been mostly healthy as of late. And with that, he's been a lot more consistent in terms of production. He can even get off blocks and do some stuff as a run defender too. As a compliment to BJ Hill, there's worse run defending duos in the league, but it's nothing special. And then he's going to rotate a lot of the time, and BJ Hill, with Chris Jenkins Jr., 2nd round pick out of Michigan. Really nice, technically sound player, but a fascinating prospect in the sense that he in many ways plays like his dad, Chris Jenkins, who was a 330-pound space eater. Junior is much smaller and much more athletic, but again, plays very much with that stout, consistent run defense technique. He's going to get inside your pads, peek, shed at the point of attack, but doesn't necessarily have the traits to dominate at the next level. I think because of the technique and the effort and some of the foot speed to get off blocks and get around blocks, he's going to be a capable run defender, but I don't think he's ever going to be an elite one. And I think you look at his play style and how Michigan used him and his athleticism and say, can he actually be much different than his dad in the sense that he's a capable run defender, but actually a really good pass rusher? The production and the skill set has not been there from Chris Jenkins as a pass rusher yet. You had to really squint and grind the tape to see the reps where he won as a pass rusher. But when he did, you saw the spin move, you saw some stuff come out occasionally, and you see the athleticism and say, okay, this could actually be a really nice player. There's a little bit of like Justin Madubuike in there, maybe even a little Sheldon Rankins. Like I'm trying to think of some pro comps as we just kind of spitball here, but he's an interesting player. We don't have the evidence that he can be a good pass rusher, but he's a young guy, and there's plenty of room for that to grow. So we'll see what you get from him. I don't think he's going to be just a bad player and a bust either way. He's a pretty high floor player for a second-round pick, but there's definitely some upside in there as well. I thought it was a nice pick, and he's definitely going to play here because behind him, Zach Carter, they've had to ask to play, unfortunately. He's taken some strides as he's just gotten way more playing time than he ever should. He's made more plays against the run than certainly he did in his rookie year, but he was like a hybrid dude coming out of Florida. I thought he was way overdrafted. To this point, that has come to fruition. I think ideally they can get him to take more of a back seat and be kind of an emergency situational third down interior player. For now, though, he is probably going to have to continue to play against the run in a part of a rotation because I just don't think McKinley Jackson's ready for it. He was very much a traits-based developmental prospect. They took him at the end of the third round. It was fine. I don't think his tape justified that, but he is a traitsy dude. You saw some of the foot speed and the play strength on film. So, they're going to have to coach him up. I just don't think they're going to get much from him this year, but maybe into the future. And then it's Jay Tufele and a bunch of others kind of competing for the back end of the roster spots. Nothing you're expecting there. So it's a solid overall defensive line. They have some depth. There's better pass rushes. There's deeper pass rushes, but there's certainly worse and thinner defensive lines overall as well. And certainly not a group that in any way you think is going to hold this defense back from being able to be successful. And I definitely don't think that's going to be the case with the linebackers either. It's a proven duo, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt. These guys get the job done, man. They come in ranked 8th to 9th for linebacker for me. Better in coverage, 4th to 6th for coverage. Just not a lot of balanced duos that can both cover like this duo. And then a little bit lower for linebacker run defense, 12th to 20th. You start with Logan Wilson. I will say, we thought he was going to take another step last year, and I had him as a stud tier player in last year's deep dive. He's actually taken a step back based on his film last year, and there was actually weeks where he was a part of the problem with that run defense being as bad as it was. I'm certainly not going to put all that on Logan Wilson, but, just some knocks here and there, whether he was blowing a gap a little bit late, missing a few too many tackles, not necessarily showing amazing play strength to get off blocks all the time. Was just overall a solid run defender last year, but didn't take that step forward that I felt he was capable of. We'll see if he has kind of a post-hype progression year in him. But that's not to say he still wasn't a really good player and isn't still a really good player moving forward. I continue to love his overall coverage ability. He's not the most incredible athlete, and he has pretty consistently given up 500 or 600 yards in coverage. So it's not that he doesn't take his losses, but he does feel that space in zone really well. He's got length and really good ball skills to convert interceptions. And just reads the quarterback's eyes really well, and he's a fluid athlete. He doesn't have insane speed or anything like that, but just covers a lot of ground, is really effective there. And again, as a run defender, he's still good. He's instinctive. He loves to hit. It's just he's still kind of putting the whole picture together there. But certainly an LB1 caliber player that maybe is even going to bounce back and have a better year this year. And then Jermaine Pratt's the perfect LB2. Pretty hit or miss in terms of run defense, has been throughout his career, just kind of fluctuates in terms of tackling consistency and consistency in terms of always reading it the right way, keeping the right gap discipline while also maintaining aggressiveness. He's been all over the place in that regard. But very nice coverage player, very similar to Logan Wilson. He will get beat. He's not overall the fastest player, but feels that space really well, has length and range, and it's a tough duo to get the ball past in the second level. Even if neither of these guys are like shut down elite linebackers in coverage, they do bring a chemistry and a certain level of consistency that it just is kind of hard to find in the league right now. So that's where you end up with them as a top 6 group for linebacker coverage. And then it's funny, their depth is like exactly the same. I like the Bengals' approach here where they understand like continuity of system and time to learn and develop in this league at this position is critical. And they like their starters, but they've kept the same backups here. I mean, Akeem Davis-Gaither has been around. They drafted him mid-round 4 or 5 years ago. This is going to be year 5 for him. And he's been stashed behind these two guys. The league wasn't willing to give him like starting money because he's only played 869 snaps in his 4-year career. Hasn't really flashed as some star, like potential star in that time, but he certainly hasn't shown to be bad either. They clearly like him. I think they're pretty happy with him as depth, and if someone goes down, maybe he would have that breakout moment. He's a really athletic dude. He's only 27 years old, so like in terms of a backup linebacker and a guy that, you know, if they want to get into 4-3 base, like they can do that with him as well, obviously. They don't do a ton of that because they have Mike Hilton, who's a linebacker in himself, but if they did want to, they could. And honestly, I don't hate it for Gaither either. If he's not getting the money out there, just come back here, kind of, I don't want to say hope for injury, but selfishly, he maybe would love to get that opportunity to have some weeks as a starter to show what he can do and maybe hit free agency again and, cash out. I don't know. Maybe I'm overselling him. I'm not like some huge Akeem Davis-Gaither truther, but I think the management of this player makes sense to me that he could emerge. But then after him, you got Joe Bachie, very much more limited in terms of traits, but they obviously like him, probably for special teams and locker room. And then Devin Harper is a more traitsy player, recently drafted for the Cowboys, 6th round, I believe. He's in development here among some other dudes vying for roster spots. But again, very solid, sound linebacker duo that's even like pretty good, like well above average to have Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. And both guys, by the way, had like somewhat down years last year, and I think you can expect at least some bit of a bounce back for them, more to like 2022 form. I don't see like physical regression from these guys necessarily. But then even if they are what they were last year, it's still a pretty solid duo. But then you go to the secondary, and again, it's pretty solid. You have one major question mark, and let's just start there with Dax Hill as your CB2. I am a huge Dax Hill defender. Unfortunately, his safety basically transition has not been pretty. I projected him as a stud free safety, as the Jesse Bates replacement in this defense, and then obviously blew up in the Bengals' face. They would love to have Jesse Bates back. They asked Dax Hill to be him. And in terms of instincts as a deep zone defender, he was not Jesse Bates, right? He was Jesse Bates in the sense of like run, chase, tackle. He was fine in terms of tackling consistency. But at Michigan, he was a cornerback, a slot cornerback, but a cornerback. He played, I want to say it was like 17 snaps as a safety in his final year at Michigan. And frankly, he is built like a cornerback. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds, incredibly fluid athlete. His man-to-man coverage skills at Michigan were his biggest selling point. And I believe I even said in my draft analysis on him, like he could probably switch outside and play outside corner like a Byron Jones did. And we're seeing that transition here now. And it is eerily familiar to what happened with Byron Jones. Now, Byron Jones was a little bit better as a safety for the Cowboys before he made the switch, but he was very inconsequential as a hyper athlete, first-round pick safety that made the switch to corner. And if you remember, Byron Jones made that switch to corner and became basically like a Pro Bowl caliber corner. But for Dax Hill, it is all there. I mean, the physical traits are absurd. He just moves differently. He's got the speed, of course, but his foot speed and change of direction it's very high. I don't want to make some crazy statement, but I would say it's probably like, if you put all the corners in the league, it's got to be like top 10 for like overall athleticism that you're looking for at the position. I think it's that high, and I don't say that lightly. But the tape is there as well. At Michigan, again, his cornerback tape, yes, slot corner, but his corner tape where they asked him to play a lot of man-to-man was phenomenal. It's just the conversion to safety, which is a completely different position, didn't work out for him. And in the preseason, he's been incredible playing outside corner for them. And the fact that he's won this job over a second-round pick last year in DJ Turner, or at least I think he's won this job. Everything I've heard is he has won this job. That is really encouraging. Funny enough, he beat out another super fast Michigan corner that had played outside corner on that defense. But obviously ranking him is a complete projection. I'm honestly really excited for this. Yes, he has to switch to outside corner, which he hasn't really done, but I just don't see anything from binging his college tape that tells me he can't do that. I didn't at the time, and I still don't. And I think going from, a safety ask that was asking a lot of Dax Hill mentally in terms of communication and coverage responsibility, this will be a much more simple role where he can lean on his athleticism, play fast, do what he does best, get in guys' face, play man coverage. And I think having played now from the slot, from the safety, it should theoretically be useful as he learns zone assignments as an outside corner. So very much a wild card, probably the biggest wild card on this entire team, but I am excited to see it. And beyond him, it's a very solid secondary. Your number one corner is an ascending young player in Cam Taylor-Britt, who's just impressive, man. I know people get tired when I bang the drum on my good draft takes. This was one of my really bad draft takes. I didn't see it at Nebraska. I had a day 3 grade on him. They took him second round, and I was like, oh, that was a lot earlier than I thought he would go. And boy, were they right. I mean, he is at worst a really nice number 2 corner. Speed, hip fluidity to run man coverage. I think he gets his head around, plays the ball in zone coverage, is shown some good ball skills from there. I think he's really versatile. Arrow should really only be pointing up. There's still some coverage consistency to clean up, and I want to see him improve his tackling ability because I think it's in there. I think he has the size to be a better tackler, but that it was an issue at Nebraska as well. But I feel really good about him as one of your starting 2 corners. I don't know that he's ever going to be a true number 1, but I definitely feel good about him as one of 2. And then, man, you don't have a single question about Mike Hilton as a slot corner. He's still one of the best slot corners in the league. He might be the best run defending slot corner. The Bengals were in the bottom third of the league in, base defense last year, and they're allowed to do that because Mike Hilton is a guy that they can flex in towards the line and, have him thump like a linebacker. And he's built he is strong and willing to do that. He had a weird start to the season last year. The first 6 weeks of the year, it looked like the wheels fell off on Mike Hilton because he'd spent the last 3 years locked in, best run defending slot corner in the league. And then was just missing tackles left and right, a complete liability against the run. And then this last 2/3 of the season, things settled back in. He looked like good old Mike Hilton. So we're just going to pretend for now that was just a little blip in what has otherwise been a remarkable run of run defense from the slot. And then from a coverage perspective, he's very good. He will take his losses. He's small. He's slower. Certain matchups can definitely outmatch him, but he's very smart, technically sound dude. As far as nickel corners go, he's top 10 for coverage, if not top 5. So you feel really good about your outside corner, your slot corner, and then these 2 safeties should just be super solid. They pay Geno Stone in free agency, and then Von Bell becomes available. They bring him in, and that allowed them to kind of move Dax Hill to outside corner. I don't have a ton to say about Geno Stone or Von Bell. I think they are both very solid safeties, very smart coverage players. Neither are the fastest, most rangy, crazy coverage players, but I think in terms of communicating the stuff on the back end, not busting coverages, being in a position to make plays, it should be substantially better than it was last year. Both these guys are coming from systems that they're different trees. You have the McDonald system with Geno Stone coming over. Von Bell, I mean, he has run this system before, but he's coming over from running kind of a Fangio split safety system, but obviously his ties to Lou Anarumo are very strong. But the Bengals do want the flexibility to run quarters, to run cover 6, and be able to rotate these guys up and down. You can do that with both of these guys. So both signings make total sense to me. From a run defense perspective, Von Bell is very solid. Geno Stone does actually have a lot to prove in terms of tackling consistency, and can that part of his game continue to grow? I mean, he really broke out last year in a full-time role. But I think you saw enough to say he can hold on to that in a different system. I don't think he repeats as like the league leader in interceptions. You know, if you're watching this series, you're probably well aware that interceptions are very fluky. A lot of those just landed in Geno Stone's lap, but you know, he's a good coverage player. A lot of those interceptions came because his process and his coverage was good. So, I mean, 4 out of 5 pieces are sound. And then it's just, what do you get from Dax Hill? You can really see how he is the linchpin for this secondary. But what is nice is they do have a second dart to throw if Dax Hill really does just suck at the NFL level, which we can't rule out, as much as I liked him coming out. DJ Turner was a second-round pick last year with a ton of speed, and he himself should be developing as he's a part of this competition. And I think he'll play either way. While this team likes to keep both linebackers on the field, I think there are situations where you can put DJ Turner outside and slide Dax Hill into that slot corner spot opposite of Mike Hilton in dime packages. And that's where he's super comfortable. So I do think he'll be a nice depth piece and give you flexibility to run nickel either way. Run dime either way. But I wasn't the biggest fan of DJ Turner. I did feel like he struggled to throttle down and change direction, and his just overall kind of feel for the position was lacking. His instincts were lacking. You love the long speed. He's never going to get beat over the top. But he definitely took more losses than he had wins in his rookie season. It wasn't a huge surprise, and it's really not a huge surprise that Dax Hill, at least at this point in time, is winning that outside corner job. But it's not that he was a horrible prospect and can't get better, right? So nice to have that highly invested piece as an insurance policy, if you will. And then Jalen Davis, more of a special teams guy. They did draft Josh Newton. I didn't get to his tape, but a 5th-round pick there with some traits out of TCU to round out your cornerback room. And then you also have Jordan Battle here. I don't know how he plays into the picture. You know, I think he played well. I think the Bengals think he played well, and I think they like Jordan Battle, but they just were so, struck by how bad the safeties were last year that they felt like signing 2 proven starters was the way to go. But if they didn't end up getting Von Bell, I think they would have been totally prepared to start Jordan Battle. Year 1 out of Alabama. I thought he was just so solid, man. He's got long speed, but he is a little more stiff. But there's just a lot to like from him. And I definitely think, like, long-term, Von Bell was only a 1-year deal here. Like, I think Jordan Battle long-term will be a starter in this room. And if one of these guys goes down, that's great depth to have and a guy that might get the job and never look back. They draft Dijon Anthony in the 7th round, another guy I didn't get to. And then they have Tyson Anderson, who's kind of a big body-thumping type special teamer in there. So, you know, it's a pretty damn solid secondary with just the big question on Dax Hill. And if Dax Hill hits, this is like a good secondary. And I don't think that's crazy to think that could happen when there's, a close comparison to someone like Byron Jones, athletically and role-wise. It's almost eye for an eye. If Dax Hill is peak Byron Jones, that's a number one corner that lets all these guys fill into like really nice roles for what they are. But when you put the entire defense together here, I do have them as my 12th ranked defense. I know they were much worse than this last year. It was a strange season. It was an uncharacteristic year for a Lou Anarumo defense that I still trust. Not to beat a dead horse here, but that cornerback 2 spot could be a weak link in this defense. But other than that, there's really not like a weakness in this defense. It's a very solid group. And there is even some upside with that defensive line with a lot of young pieces. So it shouldn't be too big of a surprise that a coach that I have the utmost faith in can at least get this back to being a solid overall defense. Do they have the upside to be an amazing defense? That is a different question. I think the lack of star talent is real. I think you have one star player, and that's Trey Hendrickson. Not to dismiss his impact, but compared to other great defenses, they don't have that high-end blue chip talent. But in terms of completeness, they do shape up very nicely. So they are 11th in pass defense for me, 13th in run defense, and 12th for overall defense. Let's talk a little special teams before we start to tie a ribbon on all of this. They are solid here as well. They come out as my 8th ranked special teams. Evan McPherson bounced back last year after a really bad 2022 season. So that did knock his overall PFF kicker grade. But you feel pretty good about what he is. 2 out of 3 years have been outstanding for him. But they do have a rookie punter. Hard to know exactly what you're getting there. Overall, though, both PFF and DVOA loved their overall team grades for special teams. It's a good culture. I think they're well coached, and this should be certainly, I think, a strength, with the only question really being the punter there. But let's summarize the team through the lens of my strengths, weaknesses, and wild cards Venn diagram here. Their strengths is a short list, but a really potent list. I mean, this is the best trio, I think, of quarterback, wide receiver duo. And that alone can carry this offense a long way, to have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Stopping that every single week is obviously a handful. And then you look at the weaknesses. Okay, running back. True, but running back. Major cornerback 2 questions, but a position group that has upside that is also listed as a wild card for me with everything we've said about Daxton Hill. And then a lack of superstar talent relative to other top contenders in the league. When you start to stack this team up against the top Super Bowl teams in the league, do they have enough difference makers to overtake those teams, in a 2 or 3 or 4 week playoff stretch? I think it's a legitimate question for this Bengals team. But then in terms of the wild cards that are going to be pivotal factors for this team's season, I mean, cornerback 2, obviously, we look at it right now, it looks like a potential weakness, but I mean, that's a ton of pressure on Dax Hill to A, not be a weakness, but also like there is potential there. And there's also DJ Turner. This isn't just like, oh, can those guys come in and not be a complete liability? It's like, man, those guys could legitimately hit and be like assets and strengths for this defense too. So there's no bigger wild card than that. We've made that very clear. But I think the youth on the defensive line, and a bit of that is like health as well with Myles Murphy. But it's not like corner where if things go wrong, it's going to be a weakness. I don't think the D-line is going to be a weakness for this team. But I think there is potential for it to emerge as a strength. If Myles Murphy gets good in the second half of the year, if Chris Jenkins is a hit as a second-round pick, if Joseph Asai can take a step up, there is actually some potential for that D-line to be more of a top 10 or so unit. And obviously, if that happens, it's going to raise the ceiling of this defense. And then wide receiver 3, likewise with what we just said about the D-line, it's never going to be the case, barring injury, that Joe Burrow just doesn't have enough guys to throw to. But if any number of these ancillary weapons, and wide receiver 3 / weapon number 3, if you will, but like Mike Gesicki, Chase Brown, Andre Yosevas, Jermaine Burton, Charlie Jones, if any number of those guys start to become a problem for opposing defenses, not only do you have this incredible duo to focus on, but if you're consistently getting beat from those guys too, that could raise the ceiling of this offense even more. So it is to me like a really stable, high floor team. Maybe even more so than people are talking about with the Bengals. And I also think there's more like promising young talent on this team than people realize, and promising young talent that just might decide like the Super Bowl fate of this Bengals team. Because as they are right now, I see a solid defense that is an offense basically carried by Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. So it's like, okay, get to the playoffs and Joe, go make magic with these guys, and we're going to outduel the other team, try to win these games 27-24. That's feasible for the Bengals. But if some of these other pieces come together, you could even throw like Amarius Mims into that convo too with some of the wild cards. Like there's upside for this to be an even better overall roster than people realize, even if we aren't ranking all those guys out as great players right now. But let's wrap up by taking a look at the schedule. Their over-under is 10.5, which is the highest we've seen so far. That's about as high as Vegas likes to set them. And when I first saw that, I was like, okay, that's interesting, but kind of makes sense. You know, the market buying into Joe Burrow. And then I saw this schedule and I said, oh, that really makes sense. For an AFC team, I don't know that we've seen a schedule this easy in that conference. I mean, I have them heavy favorites in 6 games. Two of their first 3 games are at home against my bottom 2 ranked teams. Now, the other one is at Kansas City. But to surround that with New England and Washington, and then week 4 is at Carolina. Guys, those are my bottom 3 ranked teams in this series. Then they host Baltimore, and then they go to the Giants. So they get a really cushy start, even if there's some tough games in there. And then they have other very winnable games in there as well. They host the Raiders week 9. They host Denver week 17. They have winnable games for me, hosting Pittsburgh, at Tennessee, at the Chargers, at Pittsburgh. I have them as favorites in all those games. And then this, of course, is a team that they win big games. Big game Joe, right? They've been the only team that has consistently hung with the Chiefs. I know these guys can go head-to-head with the Ravens and the Eagles and any of these guys. So this is a really friendly schedule. And when we've been going through and seeing a lot of these AFC teams have pretty tough schedules, that puts the Bengals in a really nice spot. I really like this over, honestly. I don't know that they'll shatter it. I don't think this is like a 14-win football team necessarily, but I do definitely see 11 or 12 wins on the schedule here for the Bengals. And likewise, I think that bodes really well for the division odds. We'll see what the Ravens schedule looks like when we get there. But if you feel pretty good about the Bengals getting to 11 or 12 wins and you get, plus 165 odds, which is pretty nice, especially given all the losses the Ravens had, it's going to be a pretty tight race. I think it's going to be pretty close to 50-50, and the odds obviously aren't giving you that. And also, if this is going to help them get something close to home field advantage, 15-1 in terms of Super Bowl odds for a Joe Burrow quarterbacked team that we know has a lot of success in the playoffs. I like all these odds. So sign me up for the Bengals this year. But I want to hear from you guys, what you guys think about the Bengals, what all we've said in this video here today. Let me know your comments down below. Please do hit that like button as well. It really does help. And my goal is to have another deep dive for you guys tomorrow night. So we're cranking these bad boys out. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon. Peace out.